My name is Isaiah Jefferson. I'm 71 years old. The medical taxi dropped me off at the curb, the agony from my new hip replacement searing through my leg. I had insisted the doctor let me go home early. I hadn't seen my wife in 3 days. My son Malik had promised he'd take care of her. He swore it. I limped into the house, balancing on my new cane. "B, honey, I'm home." Silence. A cold, heavy silence that felt wrong. The air was stale. "B," I called louder, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I moved past the living room and into the hallway, leaning against the wall for support. "Malik, Caitlin." I pushed open our bedroom door, and my world shattered. B was there, lying in the bed, her eyes half open and vacant, her lips cracked and white. The glass of water on her nightstand was bone dry. The pack of crackers I'd left for her, the ones she could reach on her good side, was still in its wrapper, but it had been moved, pushed just inches beyond her grasp. She was conscious. She looked at me. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Oh God, B." I lunged forward, my own surgical pain forgotten. I grabbed the empty glass. As I turned to run to the kitchen, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A social media notification. It was my daughter-in-law, Caitlin. A picture of her and Malik smiling on a bright, sunny beach, holding sangrias. They were grinning. The caption, posted 10 minutes ago from Spain, read, "Finally, a week deserved. Free from the pathetic, sick old folks." Pathetic, sick old folks. They left her here to die. They left my B here to die of thirst while they went on vacation. My grief, my panic, it all vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp stillness. My hand was perfectly steady as I pulled out my phone. I didn't call 911. I didn't call my son. I dialed another number, a number I prayed I'd never have to use. "Harrison, this is Isaiah Jefferson. Activate the containment protocol. Immediately. I want your team here in 10 minutes. Less than 10 minutes later, 2 vehicles pulled up to my quiet suburban curb. It wasn't a Whaling City ambulance. It was a sleek black private medical transport van, the kind rock stars use, and a black sedan that looked like it belonged to the government. 2 uniformed professionals, a man and a woman, stepped out with a specialized gurney. They didn't look like standard EMTs. They looked like a private extraction team. They entered the house with quiet efficiency. I was already by B's side, holding a wet cloth to her lips. She was trying to speak, her voice a dry rasp. "Where?" "Shh, baby. I'm here now. We're getting you out of this place." The lead medic, a sharp woman in her 40s, assessed the situation instantly. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, criminal neglect. "Let's move." B panicked when they tried to lift her. Her good arm flailed weakly. Her eyes widened, looking at me, terrified. She didn't understand these strangers. I put my hand on her cheek, forcing my voice to be calm, to be the rock she had always known. "B, look at me. It's okay. These are my people. They work for me. They're going to take you to a good place, a safe place." "Where?" she whispered, the sound barely audible. "Willow Creek," I said. Her eyes widened slightly, even in her weakened state. She knew the name. Everyone in the city knew Willow Creek. It wasn't a nursing home. It was a 5-star medical resort for the ultra-wealthy, a place with more doctors than patients. She'd always assumed it was a place for other people, the people we saw on television. "Zay, we can't." "Yes, we can." I kissed her forehead. "I'll be right behind you. I just have to lock up the house." I watched them skillfully transfer her to the gurney, connecting an IV drip right there in the bedroom. As they wheeled her out, the man from the sedan, Mr. Harrison himself, my lawyer and fixer for 30 years, stepped inside. He was a tall, imposing man in a perfectly tailored suit. "Zay," he said, his voice a low rumble. It started 3 days ago, Harrison. I was just too blind to see it." He nodded, his face grim. "The team is ready. The accounts. That's what I'm checking now. You wait here. Secure the house." Harrison stood guard at the front door as I limped to my office, this small, dusty room. Malik and Caitlin probably thought it was just where I paid the electric bill and tinkered with old radios. They never bothered to look closely. They never asked. Behind the worn-out copy of The Art of War on my bookshelf, I pressed a hidden panel. The bookshelf clicked and slid open, revealing a heavy, fireproof wall safe. Malik didn't even know it existed. I spun the dial. The heavy door swung open. It wasn't filled with cash. It was filled with ledgers, property deeds for apartment buildings in Atlanta, stock certificates for tech companies I'd invested in before they were household names, passports, and the master file on Jefferson, consulting the company I'd supposedly closed down 20 years ago. The company I had actually sold to a multinational corporation for $40 million. I secured the most important ledgers in my briefcase and walked back into the house, Harrison following me. Check the house, Zay. See what else they did. We need the full picture. I started in the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator, empty, except for a half-empty bottle of ketchup and an old onion. They hadn't even left food for themselves, let alone for B, but they hadn't starved. I went to the trash can. It was overflowing with takeout boxes from expensive restaurants, sushi, steak, pasta, from that Italian place downtown that cost $100 a plate. They had been feasting. They had been feasting while my wife starved just one room away. They didn't just forget, Harrison, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. They chose. I went to their bedroom, the room Malik had grown up in. It was a disaster, not a normal mess, but the mess of a hasty, excited departure. New suitcases were piled by the door. Gucci, Louis Vuitton. My eyes narrowed. They bought new luggage for their trip. Caitlin's makeup was scattered on the dresser, and under a pile of her discarded clothes on Malik's nightstand, I saw it. A stack of envelopes. I picked them up. They weren't love letters. They were red final notice, past due. I ripped one open. A credit card bill for Caitlin. $25,000. Another. A car loan for Malik's ridiculous sports car. The one I'd told him not to buy $10,000 in arrears. And then the big one. A letter from a private lender. A gambling debt, $50,000, due immediately, with an interest rate that made my blood run cold. My God, I whispered. He's a fool. He's desperate, Harrison corrected, reading over my shoulder. Desperate men are dangerous. The rage I felt was suffocating. I gripped the letters. I walked into the living room, my mind flashing back, remembering every time Malik had come to me, hat in hand. Dad, the apartment complex is raising the rent again. It's crazy, and I'd paid the difference. Dad, the car insurance went up. Can you help me out just this once? And I'd covered it. For 5 years, I had paid the mortgage on their condo. For 5 years, I had paid the insurance on their cars. I kept my wealth a secret, but I made sure my only son never truly struggled. I thought I was protecting him from hardship. I was just enabling him. I was funding the lifestyle that his ambitious, greedy wife demanded. I was the fool. Zay, you need to see this, Harrison said from my office. He was pointing at my computer, which I'd left unlocked. I checked the joint account, the one I use for household expenses and B's medical supplies. I looked at the screen, the account I kept funded with $30,000 just in case. 2 days ago, the day Malik had looked me in the eye and promised he would stay home and take care of his mother, there was a single, massive withdrawal, $20,000. The account was nearly empty. That, I said, my voice shaking for the first time, is what paid for their vacation in Spain. They stole B's medical money to go on vacation, leaving her to die. This was no longer just neglect. This wasn't just greed. This was attempted murder. I sat down heavily in my office chair. The pain in my new hip was nothing compared to the void that had just opened in my chest. I had lost my son. I hadn't lost him today. I'd lost him years ago and been too proud, too stubborn to admit it. Harrison put a hand on my shoulder. What's the call, Zay? I looked at the empty water glass I was still holding. I thought of B's cracked lips. I thought of the laughter in that social media post. I pulled out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. Harrison, get the bank manager on the line right now. I want to report a fraudulent withdrawal of $20,000. Then call the credit card companies. Report every card associated with Malik and Caitlin Jefferson as stolen. Cancel the mortgage payments on their condo and call the repo company. I want that sports car picked up by morning. Harrison smiled a thin, sharp smile. My pleasure. And one more thing, I said, pulling up the picture from Caitlin's post. Find out exactly what hotel they're staying at in Spain. I want to have a little chat with the manager about their bill. I didn't drive to Willow Creek. I rode in the back of the black sedan right behind the private ambulance carrying my wife. My new hip throbbed a dull, aching reminder of my own vulnerability. But the pain was a good thing. It kept me focused. It kept me angry. Willow Creek was not the sad, beige-colored nursing home. Malik and Caitlin had been researching for me the brochures I'd found in their trash for places called Sunset Villa or Golden Years. rest that smelled of disinfectant and despair. This place smelled like new money and expensive medicine. It was a gleaming structure of glass and stone set back on a private wooded estate. It looked more like a billionaire's medical spa than a long-term care facility. When we pulled up, there was no chaotic emergency bay. There was just a quiet covered portico where B's team was already waiting. I watched them transfer her. They were efficient, silent, and respectful. I walked in behind them. The lobby was silent. The floors were marble. The air was faintly scented with lavender. A woman in a sharp dark blue suit, the director, met me. "Jefferson," she said, her voice low and professional. "We have the Magnolia suite prepared as you specified. Lynn is waiting." I nodded, following the gurney down a wide, private hallway. We didn't pass a single other patient. We entered the suite. It wasn't a room. It was an apartment, a sitting room with a fireplace, a small kitchen for private staff, and a large bedroom with a wall of glass overlooking a private garden. The medical equipment was all there, but it was integrated into the custom cabinetry, hidden, disguised. B was already connected to new IVs. Her cracked lips were glistening with moisturizer. A nurse was gently wiping her face with a warm cloth. I walked over and took her hand, her good hand. She looked at me, her eyes clearer now. The fog of dehydration was lifting, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking confusion. She tried to speak. The stroke had made her words difficult, but I had learned to read her eyes. "Zay," she whispered. It was the why that broke me. Why this place? Why the strangers? Why had Malik done this? I leaned down and kissed her forehead, smoothing her gray hair. "Shh, baby, don't you talk. You just rest." My voice was gentle, but inside I was stone. "I told you I'd always take care of you, didn't I? I told you nothing bad would ever happen to you while I was here. But the cost," she whispered. She still thought we were the same couple we'd been 40 years ago, pinching pennies, saving for Malik's college fund. "The cost doesn't matter," I said, my voice firm. "All that matters is you are safe, and here, you are safe. No one can get to you. No one can hurt you." "Malik," she breathed his name. "I am handling Malik," I said, and the coldness in my own voice startled me. "You rest. I will be back this evening. I have to go to the bank. I have to go see Harrison. I have to. I have to fix this." She squeezed my hand. She didn't know what I was fixing. She didn't know the depth of the betrayal, and I swore to myself in that sterile, multi-million-dollar room she would never have to know. She would just know she was safe. I left her with the nurse and walked to the director's office. The woman, Miss Alvarez, was waiting for me, a tablet in her hand. "Jefferson, your wife is severely malnourished. This didn't happen in 3 days. This has been ongoing." I sat down, the pain in my hip flaring. "I know. I want her to have the best round-the-clock nursing, the best physical therapist on staff, the best nutritionist, whatever it takes." Miss Alvarez looked at me with a carefully neutral expression. She had seen families like mine before, the guilty, wealthy children bringing in the neglected parent at the last minute. She probably thought I was just like Malik. "Jefferson," she said coolly, "our premier service is substantial. The monthly rate for the Magnolia Suite with 247 specialist care is—" "I know what it costs." I interrupted, pulling my checkbook from my old tweed jacket. It was the same checkbook I'd used for 20 years. "You need a deposit. We require the first month in full, Mr. Jefferson, $35,000. I opened the checkbook. She was already preparing the insurance forms. I wrote the check, my hand steady, and slid it across the desk. Miss Alvarez looked down at it. She paused. She looked at the number again. She looked up at me, her professional mask slipping for the first time. The check was not for $35,000. It was for $210,000. "This is for the first 6 months, I said quietly. "I don't want B to be disturbed with billing. I don't want me to be disturbed with billing. Cost is not the object. Her safety is." I leaned forward. "There is one more thing. I want a private security guard posted outside her door, not a hospital guard. A private one. Someone from Mr. Harrison's firm. Add that to the bill. No one gets in or out of that room without my personal authorization. That includes my son Malik Jefferson and his wife Caitlin, especially them." Miss Alvarez's entire demeanor changed. The slight hint of judgment in her eyes was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused respect. This was a transaction she understood. This was power. "Of course, Mr. Jefferson," she said, standing up. "I will make the arrangements personally. Your wife will be completely safe here." "I know," I said. That's why I chose this place. I walked out of Willow Creek, my cane tapping on the marble floor. Harrison was waiting by the sedan, holding the door open. I got in. The adrenaline from the morning was beginning to fade, leaving just the cold, hard ache. "Where to, Zay?" Harrison asked. "The penthouse." Harrison nodded, and the car slid silently into traffic. We drove past the quiet tree-lined streets of my neighborhood and headed downtown toward the gleaming towers of glass and steel that pierced the Atlanta skyline. I looked out the window. I thought about the lie I had lived. It had started as a shield. When I sold my engineering firm, that $40 million buyout, I'd seen what it did to people. I'd seen the hunger in my partner's eyes, the greed in my first wife's, the one who left me for a richer man before I cashed that check. I vowed then I would never let money be the reason for any relationship in my life. I raised Malik in that simple house. I taught him to work with his hands just as my father, a carpenter, had taught me. I gave him an allowance, not a trust fund. I thought I was teaching him character. I thought I was teaching him the value of work, but I was wrong. I see that now. I had shielded him from hardship, but I had also shielded him from consequences. I paid for the condo when he couldn't get a loan. I paid for the car when his credit was thin. I paid and I paid and I paid. I hadn't taught him the value of work. I had only taught him the value of my work. I'd taught him that his father was a safety net, an endless resource to be plucked. And in doing so, I had created the very thing I despised, a weak, grasping man who saw his father not as a person but as an ATM, a man who would let his mother starve for a ticket to Spain, a man who had looked at my new hip, my 7 one-year-old body, not with concern, but with calculation. He was just waiting for me to die. The car pulled into a private, unmarked garage beneath a luxury skyscraper, a place Malik didn't know existed, a place I hadn't used in over a year. "It's time to stop being dad," I murmured to myself as the private elevator carried us up. "It's time for Malik to meet Mr. F. Jefferson." The doors hissed open. I stepped out, my cane clicking on the Italian marble floor. The apartment was vast, silent, and cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 180-degree view of the city skyline, a view Malik had never seen. The furniture was minimal, expensive, and covered in white dust cloths. I hadn't stayed here in over 6 months. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. It was an asset. Harrison walked in behind me, carrying the briefcase I'd packed. He went straight to the built-in bar, ignoring the rows of expensive, unopened liquor I kept for guests I never had. He opened the Sub-Zero refrigerator and pulled out 2 bottles of mineral water. He poured them into crystal glasses and handed one to me. He knew I didn't drink alcohol, not when I was working. I sat on the white leather sofa, the dust cloth crackling under my weight. I looked out at the city lights just beginning to twinkle as the sun dipped low. "He called me a pathetic, sick old folk," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Harrison stood by the window, his back to me, watching the traffic far below. "He's his mother's son, Zay." I winced. It was a physical reaction. We hadn't spoken of Selena, my first wife, in 20 years. She was the reason I'd built this fortress in the first place. She was the one who had taught me that love, for some people, is just a form of accounting. She had seen my ambition, seen the first seeds of my success, and demanded half. When I had structured my assets to protect myself, to keep the company I was building safe, she'd vanished, taking half of what I had liquid and leaving me with a bitter heart and a confused 5-year-old boy. She had taught Malik, in those few short years, that affection was a transaction. I thought I could undo her damage, I said quietly, mostly to myself. I thought if I raised him simply, if I showed him the value of work, of humility. "Humility," Harrison scoffed. He turned around, his face etched with the frustration of a man who had been biting his tongue for decades. He was a sharp man, 60 years old, the best damn lawyer in the state, and the only human being on earth who knew my full net worth. "Zay, humility is a virtue for men who have earned it. For a man like Malik who has never earned anything, humility doesn't look like a virtue. It looks like weakness. It looks like an opportunity." He was right. My great experiment in character building had been a catastrophic failure. "And that white girl he married," Harrison continued, walking over to the bar. "Caitlin, I ran the full background check you asked for 2 years ago, the one you told me to file away and never mention." "I remember," I said. "Her family is old New Orleans money, or rather, old New Orleans debt." They lost every dime they had but kept the expensive last name and the arrogant attitude. She's been hunting for a whale her whole life. She thought she'd hooked a rich man's son. He paused, letting the words sink in. But when she met you, Zay, in your little suburban house, wearing your 10-year-old sweater and driving that beat-up sedan, she must have been furious. She realized she'd married a fool who couldn't even access his own inheritance. She's been pushing him ever since, pushing him to find the money, pushing him to take what she felt she was owed. I looked down at my hands that had built an engineering firm from 2 drafting tables in a rented garage. Hands that had signed the $40 million check when I sold that firm. Hands that had just this morning trembled trying to get B a sip of water. They tried to kill her. Harrison, I whispered. Harrison's face, usually so composed, hardened. What did you say? They left her with no food, no water. I found the camera footage. I'd installed a nanny cam years ago when B's stroke first happened, just to check on her when I was at the grocery store. I'd forgotten about it. They didn't know it existed. I watched it on the way here. They didn't just forget her. They planned it. I saw Caitlin walk in, look at the crackers on the nightstand, and move them 6 inches out of B's reach. I saw her unplug the phone by the bed. They knew I was in surgery for 3 days. This wasn't neglect. It was a plan. They were hoping the dehydration, the stress that her heart would just give out. A 70-year-old woman with a history of stroke. It would have looked perfectly natural. Grieving son. Tragic accident. The silence in the penthouse was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of a siren far below. Harrison finally spoke, his voice a low growl. Zay, this changes everything. This isn't a civil suit about stolen money anymore. This is attempted murder. I know, I said. I used my cane to push myself up. My hip ached, but my spine was rigid. I walked to the window and looked down at the city I had helped build. I made a mistake, Harrison. I spent my life trying to teach my son the value of humility. I thought that by hiding my power, I could teach him to build his own. I turned to face him. The last rays of the sunset caught the anger in my eyes. The time for lessons was over. Now I'm going to teach him the value of power the hard way. I want you to use every resource, every dollar, every connection we have. I don't want to just stop them. I want to dismantle them. I want you to call the bank now. Report the $20,000 as theft. Report the credit card Caitlin is using as fraudulent. I want her stranded in that hotel when the bill comes. Then I want you to call the mortgage company for their condo, the one I co-signed for. I want to start foreclosure proceedings immediately, tonight. I paused, thinking of B's cracked lips, of that desperate, thirsty look in her eyes. I want them to have nothing, no money, no home to crawl back to. And I want the police waiting for them at the airport when they finally get there to arrest them for what they did to my wife. I've been a quiet, humble man for 20 years, Harrison. Tonight, you show them who Isaiah Jefferson really is. Harrison allowed himself a small, cold smile. He picked up his phone. That, he said, I can do. The lesson, as you put it, is about to begin. I sat in the cold, silent penthouse, the city of Atlanta spreading out below me like a carpet of diamonds. Harrison was in the adjoining study, his voice a low, methodical hum as he began the systematic dismantling of my son's life. He was on the phone with the bank, reporting the fraud. He had already called the security company. My hip was aching a deep, rhythmic throb. I ignored it. I was looking at my own phone, sitting dark on the glass coffee table. I knew it would ring. Desperate people are predictable. It buzzed, vibrating violently against the glass. The screen lit up, Malik. I let it ring once, twice, a third time. I let the panic build. I let him picture the empty house, the unanswered calls, the scenarios running through his desperate, guilty mind. Harrison looked out from the study, his hand over the receiver of his own phone. He raised an eyebrow. I held up one finger. On the 5th ring, I picked up. I leaned back against the white leather sofa. I made my voice sound calm, almost sleepy, as if I'd been napping. Malik, son, how's the trip? The silence on the other end was deafening. It was a static-filled transatlantic void. I could hear his mind racing, trying to compute how I knew. In the background, I heard the faint high-pitched sound of hotel music and Caitlin's voice, sharp and annoyed. What is it? Who is it? Then Malik's voice, sputtering, high with panic. Dad. What? What trip? How did you know I was? Dad, what's going on? I've been calling the house all day. No one is picking up. Where is Mom? Is she okay? What happened? He delivered the questions like rapid-fire accusations. He wasn't worried. He was angry, angry that the plan had hit a snag, angry that I wasn't in my predictable place. I let his questions hang in the air for another long second. I looked out the window at the skyline. "Your mother is fine, Malik," I said evenly. "She's in a better place." "A better place?" he almost shouted. I heard Caitlin gasp in the background. "What does that mean, Dad? What did you do? Did you put her in one of those homes? Is that why you're not at the house? You were supposed to be in the hospital." The accusation that I had done something, the audacity of it was almost impressive. "We'll get to your mother," I said. My voice changed. The warmth was gone. The sleepy fog was gone. I was Isaiah Jefferson now, the man who built an empire, not Zay, the simple old man who lived in the suburbs. "You sound anxious, son. Is everything all right over there in Spain? Did you check your bank account?" "What? My bank account? What are you talking about, Dad?" His voice was weaker now. The bravado was cracking. "I'm talking about my bank account, Malik," I said, my voice dropping, cold as the marble floor beneath my feet. "The one I set up for B's medical care. The one you emptied 2 days ago." I paused. "I'm talking about the $20,000 you stole." The silence this time was different. It wasn't confusion. It was the silence of a man caught, the silence of a trap springing shut. I could hear Caitlin's muffled shriek in the background. "He knows." "How does he know?" Malik finally found his voice, but it was a pathetic whisper. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about." "Stole?" I borrowed it. It was an emergency. I was going to tell you. I was going to tell you when I got back." "Borrowed it?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "You borrowed it by lying to my face, promising to stay home and care for your mother while you were already on your way to the airport. You borrowed it while she was lying in that bed alone, dehydrated, unable to reach the phone. You unplugged." "I didn't unplug. I mean, it must have fallen out." "Stop," I commanded. And he did. He just stopped, like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "You and I both know what you did. What she did. I've seen the camera footage, Malik." I heard a small choked sound. He hadn't known about the cameras. "I saw her move the crackers," I said flatly. "I saw her unplug the phone. I heard the phone fumble." Then Caitlin's voice, no longer sweet, but a snarling, panicked hiss. "Listen to me, Zay. You listen. We deserve that money. We've been taking care of you two for years, living in that dumpy neighborhood, pretending. Put my son back on the phone, Caitlin." I didn't yell. I didn't raise my voice. I used the voice that had shut down boardrooms, the voice that had made C-suite executives tremble. She must have been stunned because she went quiet. I heard the phone being snatched back. Malik's voice was just a thread. "Dad, please. It's not what it looks like. We can fix this. We'll pay it back. I promise. We're coming home. We'll be on the next flight." "Fix it," I said. "You think this is about $20,000? I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound that held no humor. "That $20,000 is what you paid for your vacation. What you stole is what's going to cost you everything else." "What? What do you mean, Dad? Don't do anything. Please. We're family." "Family?" I stood up, my cane hitting the floor with a sharp crack. "I remember when you were 10 years old, you stole $5 from my wallet. Your mother, your real mother, Selena," she laughed. She said, "He's smart. He takes what he wants." I spent the next 30 years trying to prove her wrong, trying to teach you that character was worth more than cash. I walked to the window, looking down on the ant-like cars below. "I was wrong, Malik. You didn't learn a thing. You're just a thief who got older. You let that woman, that greedy, hollow woman, convince you to leave your mother to die for what? A week in Spain? Dad, please. I'm begging you. We're sorry." "No," I said. "You're not sorry. You're just caught." I took a deep breath. "Don't bother rushing back. The locks on your condo have already been changed, the one I pay the mortgage on. And that little sports car I've been insuring for you, the repo man should be there within the hour. Your credit cards have been frozen, reported as fraudulent. And the hotel manager in Spain, he's about to get a call explaining that his guests are criminals." "No, Dad, you can't." "Enjoy your vacation, son," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "It's the last one you'll be taking for a very, very long time." I hung up the phone. The penthouse was silent again. Harrison walked out of the study, holding a file. "The bank manager is cooperating fully," he said. "He sends his regards to B. The fraud report is filed. The credit cards are frozen." "Good," I said, sitting back down. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me tired. He's going to call back. Zay. He's going to panic. He's going to get on a plane. I know, I said. Let him. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them feel, for the first time in their lives, what it's like to have no safety net. Let them feel what it's like to fall. Malik's voice crackled over the line, a desperate, pathetic attempt to regain control. Dad, listen. Listen to me. I needed that money. I needed it fast. It was an investment. It went bad. I was going to pay you back. I swear, before you even noticed. I almost laughed. An investment? I said, my voice dangerously calm. You mean the $50,000 hole you dug for yourself betting on football? Or are you talking about Caitlin's investment in designer handbags, which now totals $25,000 on my credit card? The silence on the line was thick with his realization. He wasn't just caught. He was known. You really thought I was that senile, Malik? That I wouldn't notice my own son has been unemployed for 6 months? That I wouldn't notice the collection letters you've been hiding under your mattress? I know about the job loss. I know about the gambling. I know about Caitlin's credit cards. I know everything. The fear in his voice didn't last. It curdled, twisting into something else, something ugly. Entitlement. The way it always did with him. You spied on me, he hissed. All the fake panic was gone, replaced by the deep, bitter resentment of a man who feels he's been cheated. You've been spying on me all this time. I didn't have to spy, Malik. Your desperation stinks. It's been stinking up my house for a year. You just thought I was too old to smell it. You bastard, he whispered, and I heard Caitlin in the background egging him on. You had all that money. You've been rich this whole time. You let us suffer. You made us live in that tiny condo. You made us beg you for scraps while you were sitting on millions. You made us. You made us do this. There it was, the justification, the blame, the final pathetic attempt to make his betrayal my fault. I stood up from the sofa. The pain in my new hip was a dull throb, but my voice was sharp as surgical steel. Suffer? I gave you a home. I paid the mortgage on that tiny condo for 5 years. I paid for the car you drive. I paid for the education you wasted. I gave you a life without struggle. That wasn't suffering, Malik. That was entitlement. You weren't given scraps. You were given a safety net, and you set it on fire because you were too lazy to learn how to climb the rope. Dad, wait. I didn't mean. I'm done, son. No, Dad. Listen, the hotel. They're going to call the police about the card. You have to fix it. You have to. That sounds like your problem. Enjoy your vacation. I hung up the phone. The penthouse was silent. I looked at Harrison, who was watching me, his face impassive. He'll be on the next flight, Harrison said. I know, I replied. Which gives us about 12 hours. Let's make them count. Malik stared at the phone in his hand, the deadline hissing softly in his ear. The silence of the $10,000 a night presidential suite in Marbella was suddenly deafening, broken only by the distant sound of the surf. He was pale, a fine sheen of cold sweat beading on his forehead. Caitlin was standing across the room by the floor-to-ceiling windows, admiring the new diamond bracelet they had bought that afternoon. She looked at him, annoyed. Well, what did the old fool say? Did he cry? Did he beg you to come home? Malik swallowed, his throat dry. He knew. Caitlin stopped posing. She turned around slowly, her perfectly sculpted face hardening. He knew what? That we were in Spain? He knew everything, Caitlin. He knew I lost my job. He knew about the gambling debts. He knew about the $20,000. Caitlin's red-painted lips twisted into a sneer. So, he's a senile old man. He's bluffing. What's he going to do? He said he cut off the accounts, Malik stammered, the reality of his father's cold voice finally hitting him. He said he saw the camera footage. Caitlin's face went white. Camera footage? What camera footage? There are no cameras in that dump. He said he saw you move the crackers. Malik whispered, his voice trembling. He saw you unplug the phone by her bed. Caitlin let out a sharp, ugly laugh, though her eyes were wide with panic. He's lying. He has to be. He's just an old, lonely man trying to scare us, trying to feel powerful. He'll fold. He always folds. He can't cut us off. You are his only son. She waved her hand dismissively, regaining her composure. Now stop hyperventilating. You're being pathetic. Call room service. I want more of that champagne, the good stuff, and tell them to hurry. We have reservations at that Michelin star place tonight. We are celebrating. Caitlin, I think, she said, cutting him off, her voice like ice, that you need to grow a spine. You are his heir. That money is ours. He just doesn't know it yet. Act like it. She snatched the room phone from its cradle and dialed. Yes, this is Mrs. Jefferson in the presidential suite. I want 2 bottles of the Dom Perignon, the vintage, not the regular and the full caviar tray. Charge it to the room. She slammed the phone down and glared at Malik. Show power. Now go take a shower. You're ruining the mood. Malik stood frozen for a moment before shuffling into the marble bathroom. He turned on the water, scalding hot, trying to wash away the icy fear his father's voice had injected into him. He heard a knock at the suite door. Room service, he thought. He heard Caitlin open the door. He heard voices, not just the quiet murmur of a waiter. He heard a man's voice, polite but firm, speaking in accented English. He heard Caitlin's voice suddenly high and sharp. What do you mean a problem? There is no problem. Just run the card. Are you incompetent? Malik turned off the water. He grabbed a heavy bathrobe and walked out of the bathroom, wiping his face. The suite was no longer empty. The hotel manager, a severe-looking woman in a perfectly tailored black suit, was standing in the foyer. Beside her was the head of security, a large man whose jacket did little to hide his muscular build. Caitlin, what's wrong? Malik asked, his stomach clenching. Caitlin wheeled on him, her face flushed a furious, blotchy red. This idiot, she pointed at the manager, is saying the card was declined. I am very sorry, madam, the manager, Miss Ortega, said. Her voice was utterly cold, a flat professional monotone. The card you have on file, the platinum card used for the deposit and all subsequent charges, it has been canceled. That's impossible, Caitlin snapped. It's my father-in-law's card. It's unlimited. Run it again. You're obviously doing it wrong. We have run it 3 times, Mrs. Jefferson, Ms. Ortega said, holding up a small white receipt. The response is not insufficient funds. The response is card canceled, reported fraudulent. Fraudulent. The word hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Malik felt his knees go weak. He did it. He actually did it. Caitlin's face went from red to a ghostly white. The anger was momentarily replaced by pure animal panic. She fumbled in her new Chanel purse and pulled out her own credit card. Use this one. My personal card. It's fine. Ortega took the card without a word. She handed it to the security guard, who produced a portable machine from his jacket. He swiped the card. A long, loud, angry beep filled the suite. The guard looked at Ms. Ortega and slowly shook his head. That one, Ms. Ortega said, her voice dropping, is also declined. Maximum limit reached. This is harassment, Caitlin shrieked, finally dropping the pretense of the wealthy heiress. Her voice was shrill. We are guests here. We are valued clients. You can't treat us like this. Madam, Ms. Ortega said, stepping forward, her composure unshakable. What I cannot do is allow guests to occupy our most expensive suite without a valid method of payment. Your bill? She glanced at a tablet held by her assistant. For the last 3 days, which includes the spa treatments for 2, the purchases from the hotel boutique you charged to the room, and the 2 bottles of Dom Perignon you just ordered, comes to 14,870 euros. She looked up, her dark eyes meeting Caitlin's. We require payment in full now. We will pay you when we check out, Malik stammered, stepping forward, clutching the bathrobe tighter. At the end of the week, like we planned, we're waiting on a wire transfer. The end of the week is no longer an option, the manager stated. Your reservation has been canceled, effective immediately. You can't do that, Malik yelled. I can, Ms. Ortega replied, because your father-in-law, Mr. Isaiah Jefferson, contacted us personally 30 minutes ago. He provided documentation. He is the primary account holder. He has informed us that any charges made by you or Mrs. Jefferson are unauthorized and fraudulent. Caitlin looked like she was going to be sick. She stumbled back. He called the hotel. He humiliated us. He did, Miss. Ortega confirmed. He was very thorough. He also informed us, and I quote, that you are no longer welcome in his life or on his accounts, and that the U Embassy has been notified of your fraudulent activity. This was it. This was the true nightmare. They weren't just broke. They were criminals, stranded. Now, the manager continued, gesturing to the 2 bellhops who had appeared silently in the doorway. You will either provide a valid form of payment for the 14,870 euros, or we will be forced to hold your luggage and your passports as collateral while we contact the Guardia Civil, the Spanish police. You can't take our passports, Malik pleaded, his voice cracking. That's illegal. On the contrary, sir, Ms. Ortega said, it is hotel policy for non-payment by foreign nationals. We have copies of your passports on file from check-in. You have 10 minutes to find the funds. After that, this becomes a police matter. The manager and her team stepped back out into the hallway, leaving the door pointedly open. The security guard remained standing just inside the threshold, arms crossed, watching them. Caitlin collapsed onto the silk bedspread. The fight was gone. She was trembling, hyperventilating. He ruined us, she whispered, the words catching in her throat as tears began to cut black mascara tracks down her pale face. That old senile bastard. He ruined us. He ruined everything. Malik looked around the opulent suite. It had felt like his birthright just an hour ago. Now it felt like a cage. He looked at his wife sobbing hysterically, and at the silent, implacable security guard by the door. His father hadn't just cut him off. He had stranded him. He had set him adrift in the middle of the ocean in a foreign country with no money, no power, and no way home. The lesson wasn't just starting. It was already in full, brutal swing. 10 minutes, Ms. Ortega had said. He called the hotel, Caitlin whispered. The words were choked, incredulous. That old bastard called the hotel. He humiliated me. He cut off the cards, Caitlin, Malik said, his voice trembling. He felt cold despite the heavy bathrobe. He cut everything, the hotel, the cards. What are we going to do? Caitlin's panic lasted only a second. It was replaced by a cold, reptilian fury. She spun around, her eyes scanning the room not for an escape, but for an asset. She ripped open her new, half-empty Gucci suitcases, throwing silk shirts and new shoes onto the floor. Cash? She hissed, tearing through her purses. Where is the cash we brought? I only brought a few thousand, Malik said, his hands shaking as he fumbled for his own wallet. For tips, I don't know. I thought we had the card. They dumped their wallets on the bed, a pathetic pile of bills. Maybe $3,000, and a few €100. It wasn't enough. It wasn't even close to 15,000 euros. This is your fault, Caitlin shrieked, grabbing a fistful of her own hair. You said he was a senile fool. You said he'd be in a home by Christmas. I thought he was, Malik yelled back, his voice cracking. He acted like it, the old clothes, the cheap car, Caitlin's eyes stopped. They locked onto his wrist. The watch, she said. Malik instinctively covered the Rolex. What? No, Caitlin. This was from my dad for my college graduation. Your dad hates you? She screamed. He just proved it. That watch is just another one of his lies. It's the only thing we have left that's worth anything. Are you going to sell it, or are you going to explain to the Spanish police why you've been living here on a fraudulent credit card? Give it to me. She lunged for his wrist, her nails scratching his skin. Malik pulled back, but he knew she was right. He looked at the heavy gold watch. His father had given it to him. He'd said, "A good man is always on time. This is a tool, not a toy." Malik had just seen it as a toy. He slowly, painfully unclasped it. The weight of it left his wrist. It felt like an amputation. He handed it to Caitlin. She didn't hesitate. She stormed to the door and shoved the watch at the security guard. "We need to sell this now. A hora, a pawn shop, a joyeria." The guard looked at her, then at the manager, Ms. Ortega, who had been watching from the hall. Ortega nodded, unimpressed. The trip to the pawn shop was the longest walk of Malik's life. He had to go bathrobe, and all escorted by the large security guard. The night air in Marbella was warm, but he was shivering. The jeweler, a sleepy man roused from his back room, knew he had them over a barrel. He looked at the Rolex, then at Malik's pathetic attire, and offered them 5,000 euros. "It's worth 20,000 euros, Malik pleaded. The jeweler shrugged. 5,000 euros cash. Or I go back to bed. They took the money. Back in the suite, they combined the cash from the watch with the cash from their wallets. It was just enough to cover the bill. They threw the messy pile of euros onto Miss Ortega's desk in the lobby. She counted it slowly, deliberately. "It is all here," she said finally, without a trace of apology. "Your reservation is terminated. You have 30 minutes to vacate the premises." They didn't have money for a limo. They didn't have money for a proper taxi. They had to drag their new, now nearly empty, designer suitcases down the brightly lit avenue, past laughing tourists and glittering nightclubs, until they could flag down a cheap cab to the airport. At the Malaga airport, the humiliation continued. They couldn't afford business class. They couldn't even afford a direct flight. They had to use the last of their cash, the scraps left over from the watch, to buy 2 one-way tickets on a budget airline, economy class. Back of the plane, middle and aisle seats, wedged between a crying baby and a man who smelled of sour wine. The plane took off. 12 hours of recycled air and cramped legs lay ahead of them. For the first hour, they sat in venomous silence. Malik just wanted to close his eyes, to pretend this wasn't happening. But Caitlin wouldn't let him. As soon as the flight attendants dimmed the cabin lights, she turned on him. Her voice was no longer a shriek. It was a low, concentrated hiss, more dangerous than any yell. "You are a fool, Malik. A weak, pathetic, useless fool." "Me?" Malik hissed back, mindful of the sleeping passenger next to him. "You were the one who posted on social media, pathetic old folks." "I was thinking what you told me to think," she shot back. "I was thinking what you've been saying for a year, that your father was a senile, miserly old man, that he was losing it, that he'd be in a home by Christmas and we'd finally get what we deserve." "I thought he was," Malik insisted, his voice cracking. "The old clothes, the cheap car, the way he just sat there. How was I supposed to know?" "You were supposed to know because you're his son," Caitlin whispered, her words like needles. "You lived with him for 30 years, and you couldn't even manage your own father." "My plan was perfect. It was simple." Malik felt a chill. "What plan, Caitlin? What are you talking about?" "The plan to get him into a home?" Caitlin laughed. It was a horrible, dry, bitter sound in the dark cabin. "Oh, grow up, Malik. That wasn't the plan. That was just step one." She leaned in closer, her perfume smelling sour with rage. "The plan was simple. We go on vacation. We have an alibi. The old woman with her weak heart and her stroke history is left alone, no food, no water, no phone. The stress, the dehydration, her heart gives out. It's a tragedy. We fly home, devastated to find the terrible news. We grieve. We inherit everything. Clean, simple. But you got impatient." Malik stared at her. He felt the blood drain from his face. Inherit. Inherit what? The house? The savings? "No, you idiot," she whispered, her eyes glittering in the dark. "The inheritance, the money he was hiding. I knew he had it. People like that, the ones who pretend to be poor, they're always the richest. I told you my plan to get him declared incompetent was good. We'd get power of attorney. We'd find the real accounts. But you had to steal that $20,000 now? You just couldn't wait. You couldn't handle one simple, senile old man." Malik couldn't breathe. The air in the cabin was too thick. "You wanted my mother dead. I wanted what we were owed," Caitlin snapped. "And now it's all gone. All of it. Because of you. You are weak. Your father knew it, and so do I. You lost us everything." Malik turned away from her. He stared at the plastic back of the seat in front of him. He didn't speak again for the rest of the flight. He didn't hear the baby crying. He didn't feel the turbulence over the Atlantic. He just sat there in the dark next to this stranger he had married. He realized his father had been right about everything. He wasn't just flying home to face his father. He was flying home to face the consequences of being a fool. And he knew, with a certainty that settled like ice in his stomach, that the locks on his condo door were just the beginning. The 12-hour flight back from Spain was a descent into a new kind of hell. They sat in the cramped, non-reclining seats in the last row of the budget airline, a crying baby behind them, the smell of recycled air and stale peanuts filling their lungs. Caitlin had not spoken a word to Malik since her final venomous declaration in the dark cabin. She had simply stared at the seat back in front of her, her face a mask of cold, calculating fury. Malik, for his part, was numb. He was trapped at 30,000 feet next to a woman who had, by her own admission, been planning his parents' demise. He thought about his mother, Bea. He pictured her in that bed. He saw Caitlin moving the crackers. He felt sick. The landing in Atlanta was rough. They stumbled off the plane, disheveled, exhausted, and carrying the same empty designer suitcases they had left with. They looked like refugees. The taxi ride from the airport to their condo was silent. Caitlin paid for it with the last of the crumpled euros she'd hidden in her shoe, the remnants of the Rolex sale. Malik just stared out the window, watching the familiar skyline of Atlanta approach. It no longer looked like home. It looked like a fortress he was about to lay siege to, armed with nothing. They pulled up to the curb of their luxury condo building. The doorman, who usually greeted them with a respectful nod, looked at them strangely as they dragged their own bags in. "Rough trip, Mr. Jefferson?" he asked. Caitlin snapped. "What's wrong?" As she tried her key in the door. "It's stuck." "Useless," she muttered. She shoved him aside, grabbed the key, and jammed it into the lock herself. She grunted, trying to force it. The key wouldn't turn. "It's the wrong key," she said, confused. "It's the only key we've ever had," Malik said, his panic rising. Caitlin pounded on the door, a loud, sharp thud, thud, thud. "Hello? Is somebody in there? Maintenance?" No one answered. The hallway was silent. "Malik," Caitlin said, her voice suddenly flat, dead. He looked where she was pointing. He hadn't seen it before. Taped to the dark wood of the door, just below the peephole, was a plain white envelope. It looked official. With a shaking hand, Malik tore it from the door. He ripped it open. It was a single sheet of paper, thick and formal. He read it aloud, his voice barely a whisper. Notice of immediate termination of residency. As of 12/1/A, this date. Any and all occupancy rights for Malik and Caitlin Jefferson for this unit are hereby revoked by the sole owner and guarantor, Mr. Isaiah Jefferson. Caitlin let out a small, strangled sound. Malik kept reading, his blood turning to ice. All personal possessions remaining inside are considered forfeit as partial payment for outstanding debts. Any attempt to gain entry will be treated as criminal trespass and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Malik dropped the paper. It fluttered to the carpeted hallway floor. Forfeit. Criminal trespass. His father's name. Caitlin's composure finally completely shattered. It wasn't a sob. It was a shriek, a high-pitched animal keen of pure rage and loss. "He locked us out. He locked us out of our home." "It's not our home, Caitlin," Malik whispered, the terrible truth finally crashing down on him. It never was. It was his. "My clothes!" she screamed, clawing at the door with her bare hands, her expensive manicure scraping the wood. "My jewelry, my shoes, my mother's pearls are in there. He can't do this." "Caitlin, stop!" Malik hissed, pulling her away. "People will hear. I don't care. I want my things." Malik fumbled for his phone, his mind racing. "I'll call him. I'll fix this. He has to. He's my father." He dialed his father's number, the one he'd been calling for 3 days. The phone didn't even ring. Just a cold electronic beep, beep, beep. "The number you have dialed has been blocked or is no longer in service." He tried again. Blocked. Caitlin stared at him, her face a mask of disbelief and pure, unadulterated contempt. "Blocked. He blocked you. He blocked his only son." Malik's mind was short-circuiting. No house, no money, no phone access. "The old house," he stammered, grabbing their suitcases. "We have to go to the old house. The house in the suburbs. B has to be there. He wouldn't move B. He's just trying to scare us. We just have to see him. We just have to apologize." Caitlin looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "Apologize? I'm not apologizing to that old fool. I'm going to confront him. He can't do this to us." They scrambled back into the elevator, back down to the lobby, past the now suspicious doorman, and back onto the street. They looked like what they were, homeless, desperate. They barely had enough cash left for another cab ride. The 30-minute drive to the suburbs was a tense, vibrating silence. Caitlin was vibrating with fury. Malik was just a hollow shell, his mind numb. He tried to rehearse what he would say. "Dad, I'm sorry. I messed up." It was Caitlin. She's pregnant." Yes, that was it. He would invent a pregnancy, a good, desperate lie. A grandchild. His father couldn't say no to a grandchild. The cab pulled onto the familiar, quiet street he had grown up on, the street he had despised for being so simple, so boring. But as they got closer, Malik felt a new kind of dread. The house was dark. Usually, Zay left the porch light on always. He'd said it was for B, in case she woke up and felt alone. Tonight, the house was a black silhouette against the evening sky. It looked cold, empty, and there was a car parked at the curb, a black SUV. Not a police car, but something that looked official. It was clean, unmarked. "Who's that?" Malik asked, his voice trembling. "Did he call the cops?" "Don't be stupid," Caitlin snapped, paying the driver. "It's probably just a neighbor. Now stop shaking and get the key." They got out, dragging their bags up the same driveway Malik had learned to ride his bike on. He still had the key to this house on his ring. He'd kept it for emergencies. He walked up the familiar porch steps. Before his key could even touch the lock, a voice cut through the darkness. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, sir." Malik froze. A large man stepped out from the shadows of the porch. He wasn't in a police uniform. He wore a crisp black suit, a small earpiece, and the calm, bored expression of a professional. He was built like a refrigerator. "Who are you?" Malik stammered. "This is my father's house. I'm Malik Jefferson. I live here." The guard nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting him. "I know who you are, Mr. Jefferson, and I'm afraid I can't let you on the property." Caitlin pushed past Malik, her arrogance returning. "What are you talking about? Get out of our way. This is our family home." The guard didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes fixed on Malik, a predator's calm focus. "No, ma'am. You don't live here. This is the private residence of Mr. Isaiah Jefferson. My firm, Harrison Security Solutions, has been retained to secure the premises." He paused, letting the name sink in. "You are not on the guest list." Harrison, his dad's lawyer. This wasn't an old man's angry outburst. This was a cold, calculated legal maneuver. "Where is he?" Malik demanded, trying to find some scrap of authority in his voice. "Where is my father? And where is Bee? Is she in there? Is she okay?" "I am not at liberty to discuss the whereabouts of my client or his wife," the guard said in a perfect monotone. "This is ridiculous," Caitlin shrieked, trying to dart past him toward the door. The guard didn't touch her. He didn't have to. He simply shifted his weight, blocking the entire doorway with his body. He was a human wall. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "if you attempt to force entry, I will be legally obligated to detain you for trespassing." Malik grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Caitlin, stop. He's not joking." "But our stuff," she wailed, the sound high and pathetic. "The condo is locked. We have nothing. We have nowhere to go." "That sounds like a personal problem, ma'am," the guard said, his voice still flat. "Listen to me," Malik pleaded, turning back to the guard, resorting to his old tactics. "This is a misunderstanding, a family argument. He's my father. He's upset. He's old. He's not thinking clearly. He just had hip surgery." The guard almost smiled. It was a cold, thin expression that didn't touch his eyes. "My client, Mr. Jefferson, has never sounded more clear-headed in his life, sir." He was extremely specific in his instructions. "What instructions?" Malik whispered, though he already knew. "That if Mr. Malik Jefferson or Mrs. Caitlin Jefferson appeared on this property, I am to inform them that they are to leave immediately. If they refuse, I am to contact the Atlanta Police Department and have them arrested." His specific words were for trespassing and attempted elder coercion. The words were so precise, so legal, so final. "He would have his own son arrested," Malik whispered. The lie about the pregnancy died in his throat. This man, this new version of his father, wouldn't be swayed by a lie. He would demand a paternity test. "My instructions are clear, sir. You need to leave now." Caitlin was shaking, speechless with a rage so profound it had no sound. She opened her mouth, but only a small puff of air came out. Malik just stared at the front door, the door he had run through as a child, the door he had slammed as a teenager, the door he had walked out of with his new bride, laughing about the old man's simple life, the door that was now and forever locked to him. "Come on, Caitlin," he said, his voice hollow. He took her arm. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice small, defeated the voice of a child. "I don't know." They turned around and walked away from the dark, silent house. They walked past the black SUV, its tinted windows reflecting their pathetic, defeated images. They walked down the quiet suburban street, dragging their expensive, empty suitcases on the pavement. They were in their old neighborhood, surrounded by the sounds of their childhood, and they were completely, utterly homeless. The guard watched them go until they turned the corner. He lifted a walkie-talkie to his mouth. "Harrison, this is Officer Grant. They're gone." "Yes, sir." "Understood. I'll maintain the post." They stood on the sidewalk, defeated, their expensive luggage suddenly feeling cheap and heavy on the pavement. Caitlin was scanning her phone frantically, searching for a motel that would take cash. Her face was illuminated by the harsh white glow of the screen. Malik just stared at the dark house, his childhood home, now guarded against him like a fortress. "This is a nightmare," Caitlin muttered. "We have nowhere to go." We're going to have to sleep at the airport, you idiot." Her words were cut short by the sound of a car engine, a deep, quiet purr, not the sound of a cheap cab. The black sedan that had been parked outside Willow Creek, the one Harrison had been driving, glided silently to the curb right in front of them. The tinted back window slid down. Malik and Caitlin froze. Inside, bathed in the soft, warm glow of the car's interior lighting, sat Isaiah Jefferson. He was not the man they remembered. He was not the frail 7-1-year-old man in a faded bathrobe recovering from hip surgery. This man was wearing a dark charcoal gray suit, perfectly tailored. His shirt was crisp white. A simple, elegant silk tie was knotted perfectly at his throat. His gray hair, usually soft and messy, was neatly combed. He wasn't holding a cane. He wasn't leaning on a walker. He sat upright, his posture radiating a cold, solid power they had never seen before. He looked like a CEO. He looked like a judge. He looked rich. He just stared at them for a long moment, his eyes cold and appraising, watching them stand there on the sidewalk like common vagrants. Malik was the first to find his voice, a high-pitched, desperate sound. "Dad, what are you doing? What is all this? What's going on?" Caitlin, seeing her last hope, instantly switched tactics. The cold fury vanished, replaced by a mask of terrified, tearful concern. She dropped her suitcase and rushed to the car window. "Dad, oh Zay, thank God," she cried, her voice breaking with practiced perfection. "We were so worried. We got home and the locks were changed, and this man, he wouldn't let us in. We thought something terrible had happened to you. We thought you'd been kidnapped." Malik rushed forward, following her lead. "She's right, Dad. We were terrified. Where's Mom? Is she okay? What's going on?" Zay continued to look at them. He didn't speak. He just let them perform their lies, echoing in the quiet suburban street. Caitlin pressed her hand to the window, tears now streaming down her face. "Zay, please. We are so sorry about the trip, about everything. We were stressed. We weren't thinking. We would never have left if we knew Bee was in danger. We didn't mean to leave her alone. It was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake." "A mistake," Zay finally said. His voice was not the warm, slightly raspy voice of their father. It was a new voice, deep, resonant, and utterly devoid of warmth. "You're right, Caitlin," he continued. "It was a terrible mistake. Your mistake. We'll make it right," Malik pleaded, his hands pressed against the car door. "We swear. We'll pay back the $20,000. I'll get a job. 2 jobs. Just let us come home, please, Dad. It's cold out here. We're family." Zay looked at Malik. Then he turned his cold gaze to Caitlin, who was still managing to produce perfect crystalline tears. "Dad, no." "Oh yes," Zay said, his voice hardening. "I saw it all, Caitlin. I sat in my hotel room this afternoon and I watched the recording. I watched it 3 times just to be sure. I saw you walk into the room. I saw you look at my wife, your mother-in-law, lying there helpless." Caitlin began to tremble, a real, uncontrollable shaking. "I saw you pick up the small package of crackers from the nightstand," Zay continued, his voice precise like a surgeon's blade. "I saw you look right at her, and then I saw you move it just 6 inches out of her reach." "No," Caitlin whispered, shaking her head. "No, I didn't." "I saw you," Zay's voice boomed, cracking through the night air, making both of them jump. The power in his voice was terrifying. "I saw you do it. And then I saw you walk over to the wall. I saw you look at the phone on the nightstand, the one Bee could use to call for help, and I saw you unplug it from the wall." Malik stared at the black sedan, his mind struggling to connect the dots. The man sitting in the back seat looked like his father, but he acted like a stranger. He was calm. He was powerful. He was in control. "How?" Malik finally whispered, his voice cracking. "Dad, how are you doing this?" Caitlin, who had been frozen in disbelief, her hand still raised from where she'd been pleading, blinked. "What are you talking about, Malik?" "This." Malik gestured wildly, panic rising. "The security, the lawyers, Harrison, that place you took Mom, Willow Creek. I know that place, Caitlin. I've heard of it. It costs a fortune. Where did you get that kind of money?" He was pacing on the dark sidewalk, now a man unraveling. He looked from the expensive tailored suit his father was wearing to the silent, imposing driver to the gleaming finish of the luxury car. You're just a retired engineer. You live on a pension. You live in that small house. You're broke. We have to help you." Caitlin's eyes widened, a new, horrifying thought dawning on her. "He's right," she said, her voice dropping. "You're bluffing. This is all a show. You've hired these people with what? The last of your savings? You're ruining yourself, you old fool, just to scare us. It's all fake." Zay almost smiled. It was a cold, tired, pitying expression. "A show," he repeated. "A bluff. You're standing there homeless, penniless, and locked out of your life, and you still think you're the ones in control. You still think I'm the fool." He leaned forward, the car's soft interior light casting shadows across his face. "You asked how I have this money, Malik. You've lived in my house for most of your 42 years. In all that time, did you ever once ask me what I actually did for a living?" Malik was taken aback. "You were an engineer at the city, and that was just the initial sale, Malik. That was before I moved it into investments, before I acquired the apartment blocks in downtown Atlanta, before I bought the commercial real estate in D, before I bought this car, before I bought the penthouse I'm currently staying in, the one you've never seen." Caitlin finally found her voice. It was a strangled, horrified croak. "If you have that money, then why?" Her voice rose to a shriek. "Why the small house? Why that awful old car? Why the old clothes?" Zay's gaze shifted to her, and his eyes were filled with a pity so cold, so deep it was far worse than hatred. "For him?" Zay said, nodding at Malik. "For me?" Malik asked, pointing at his own chest. "For you," Zay confirmed. "When your mother, Selena, left me, she taught me a valuable lesson. She tried to take half of what I was building. She taught me that money attracts parasites. So, I learned to hide it. I learned to live simply. And when I got full custody of you, I decided to make that simple life a lesson." His voice softened, but the fury beneath it was a churning river. "I wanted my son, my only son, to grow up understanding the value of a dollar earned, not a dollar inherited. I wanted you to learn character. I wanted you to learn humility, hard work, integrity. I wanted you to see a man who was rich in his spirit, not in his bank account. I wanted you to build something yourself," he said, his voice raw. "I gave you the best education. I gave you the foundation. I gave you a safety net every single time you stumbled. I was waiting, Malik. For 42 years, I was just waiting for you to become a man, waiting for you to stand on your own 2 feet, waiting for you to show me just once that you were worthy of the truth." Zay looked away from them, his gaze finding the dark, silent house they had just been kicked out of. "But you didn't, did you?" he said, his voice heavy with the weight of that failure. "You never grew up. You just got older." He turned his eyes back to Malik, and they were like polished steel. "You didn't see humility as a virtue. You saw it as weakness. You didn't see my simple life as a choice. You saw it as a failure. You didn't see a father trying to teach you. You just saw a pathetic, sick old folk who was in your way." He leaned forward, his face close to the open window. "You saw an obstacle. You saw a bank account you could plunder while you and your greedy, hollow wife left my bee to die." Zay's voice dropped to a final, devastating whisper. "You failed the test, Malik. You failed. And now class is over." Malik just stood there on the sidewalk, his mouth open, shaking his head as if he could physically deny the words he had just heard. $40 million. The number was impossible. It didn't make sense. His father, the man in the worn-out cardigan, the man who argued about using the air conditioning, was a multi-millionaire. Caitlin was completely white, her perfectly applied makeup standing out like a mask on a corpse. She was staring at Zay, her eyes wide, the calculation happening behind them so fast it was almost visible. She wasn't just seeing a father-in-law. She was seeing the whale she had hunted, caught, and then lost in the most humiliating way possible. "Class is over," Zay had said. He looked at them not with the fire of anger, but with the cold, dead calm of a surgeon who has just closed an incision on a procedure that has failed. The love was gone. All that was left was the clinical, methodical cleanup. You're lying," Malik finally stammered. It was a weak, pathetic sound. "You have to be. You're trying to scare us. This is a test. A sick, cruel test. A test." Zay's voice was quiet, almost conversational. He shifted in his seat, the fine wool of his suit jacket pulling taut. "Yes, Malik, it was a test. Your entire adult life has been a test, and you just failed. You failed in a way that even in my worst nightmares I never imagined." Caitlin found her voice. It was a low, desperate hiss. You can't do this to us. We are your family. That money, it belongs to Malik. He's your son. You can't just hide it and then throw us out on the street." Zay looked at her, and for the first time, a glimmer of something other than coldness appeared in his eyes. It was pity. "You still don't get it, do you, Caitlin?" he said. "You're standing there a criminal, and you're still trying to negotiate your inheritance. This isn't about money anymore. This is about consequences. This is about the law." "The law?" Malik laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "What law? You're my father. You can't call the law on me for borrowing money." Zay leaned his head back against the rich leather of the car's headrest. He looked tired. "First," he said, holding up one finger, "we have the matter of your vacation, the trip to Spain. That was a nice touch. You took $20,000 not from my investment account, Malik, not from my $40 million. You took it from the account clearly labeled Beatrice Jefferson Medical Care. You stole your mother's medicine money to drink sangria on a beach." "I was going to pay it back," Malik pleaded. "That's what a thief tells himself," Zay said flatly. "But to the bank and to the police, it's called wire fraud, and it's called felony theft. Harrison filed the report with the Atlanta PD an hour ago." Caitlin's hands flew to her mouth. "Police? You called the police?" "Oh, I'm just getting started," Zay said. "That brings me to you, Caitlin." Second, he held up another finger. "You're a clever girl. You managed to get a credit card issued in my name. You've been using it for Harrison?" Harrison's voice, deep and professional, came from the driver's seat without him even turning around. 18 months, Mr. Jefferson. Total charges amount to $47,312, plus the $14,800 from the hotel in Spain, which was just reported as fraudulent." "Identity fraud," Zay said, his eyes locking on Caitlin's. "That's the legal term, a federal offense. I believe the prison sentence for that is quite long, especially when it's used to defraud a senior citizen." Caitlin was shaking her head, her eyes darting back and forth, looking for an escape. "No, you let me. You never said anything. You let me use it. I didn't know about it until today." "You foolish girl," Zay said. "You were stealing from me, and you were just arrogant enough to believe I'd never find out." Malik turned on her, his face a mask of betrayal. "You told me he gave you that card. You said it was a gift." "Shut up, Malik," she screamed. "You're making it worse." "And third," Zay said. His voice cut through their argument, silencing them both instantly. The coldness was back, but it was deeper. It was arctic. "Third is B, my wife. Your mother." He looked at Malik, and all the pity was gone. "You left her. You took her money. You unplugged her phone. And you left her in that bed to die of thirst. You left her for 3 days. It was an accident," Caitlin shrieked. "We forgot. We were in a rush." "You forgot?" Zay's voice was a whisper, but it was more terrifying than any shout. "I have the footage, Caitlin. I have the video. I watched you move the crackers. I watched you unplug the phone. Harrison has the file. He calls it felony elder endangerment. He calls it criminal neglect resulting in bodily harm. He calls it attempted murder." Caitlin finally broke. "You can't prove that it's a video." Zay looked at Malik, then at Caitlin. His face was a mask of cold, settled finality. "You called me a liar," he said. "You called me a senile old fool on drugs. You said I was bluffing. You said I couldn't prove anything." He gestured with his chin toward the two approaching officers. "It seems my bluff has arrived. You can explain the rest to them." The two police officers approached, their footsteps heavy on the quiet sidewalk. They didn't run. They didn't draw their weapons. They just walked with a heavy, methodical certainty. Officer Miller, the taller of the two, stopped a few feet from Malik and Caitlin. His eyes took in the scene, the two designer suitcases on the curb, the disheveled couple, and the man watching from the back of the luxury sedan. "Malik Jefferson, Mrs. Caitlin Jefferson?" Officer Miller asked, his voice polite but firm. Malik just nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Caitlin, however, saw an opening. She saw a new audience. She launched herself forward, not at Zay, but at the officer, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Oh, thank God," she wailed, her voice thick with manufactured terror. "Officer, thank God you're here. You have to help us. He won't let us in our house." She pointed a trembling finger not at Zay, but at the security guard, Grant, who was still standing by the porch. The officer didn't look at Grant. His eyes stayed on Caitlin. Ma'am, we're not here about a trespassing dispute. He's been harassing us, Caitlin continued, desperate. He's my father-in-law. He's senile. He just had surgery. He's kidnapped my mother-in-law, B. He's locked us out. Please, you have to do something. Officer Miller looked at her, his expression unreadable. He then looked at Malik. Sir, is that true? Is your mother in danger? Malik was trapped. He looked at Caitlin, then at the officer, then at his father's cold silhouette in the car. He couldn't speak. Caitlin saw his hesitation and lunged. He's terrified of him, she screamed, pointing at Zay. He controls all the money. He's abusive. He's been threatening us. That's enough, ma'am, Officer Miller said, his voice hardening. He and his partner had now flanked them. You're both under arrest. The words hit the air like a gunshot. What? Malik whispered. Caitlin froze. Under arrest for what? We're the victims. Malik and Caitlin Jefferson, the second officer said, pulling out handcuffs. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and felony elder endangerment. The moment the steel touched Caitlin's wrist, something in her snapped. Her mask of the terrified victim didn't just crack, it exploded. Her head whipped around, her eyes filled with pure reptilian hatred, landing on Malik. He did it! She shrieked, the sound echoing down the dark street. It was him. It was all him. Malik stumbled back as if she had physically struck him. Caitlin, what are you doing? He lied to me, she screamed at the police officer who was calmly cuffing her. He told me the money was his. He told me his father was a senile old fool who needed to be put in a home. He said his father gave me that credit card. He told me his mother was fine. He forced me to go on that trip. He's the one you want. He's the thief. I'm just his wife. I didn't know anything. Malik just stared at her. His whole world, which had been crumbling for 12 hours, finally turned to dust. She hadn't just been in on it. She hadn't just been his partner. She had been the pilot. And now, at the first sign of disaster, she was strapping on the only parachute and jumping from the plane, leaving him to burn. Good, I said. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. It is justice, Zay, Harrison said gently. He knew me too well. He saw the pain I couldn't hide. They made their choices. You just made yours. He was right. I had made my choice the moment I saw B in that bed. I had chosen my wife. I had chosen decency. I reached for the remote and clicked the television off. The penthouse was silent, filled only with the soft afternoon sunlight. B had finished her exercises and, with Angela's help, had moved to her favorite wheelchair by the window, the one that overlooked the park. I walked over to her. My own hip was just a dull ache now, a memory. I stood behind her chair, placing my hands on her shoulders. She reached up with her good hand, the right one, and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was warm. It's over, B, I said quietly. She nodded, her eyes still on the horizon, watching the clouds. That money, I said, thinking of the $40 million, the accounts, the properties, the weight of it all, the secret that had poisoned my son. I'm going to do something with it, something good. She turned her head, looking up at me, her eyes curious. I'm going to start a foundation, honey, I said, and I'm calling it the Beatrice Foundation. Her eyes, the eyes I loved, filled with tears. It's going to be a foundation, I continued, my voice growing stronger, the purpose of it settling in my heart, filling the hollow space that Malik had left. It's going to be dedicated to protecting people like us, a foundation that provides immediate legal aid, private security, and emergency-safe housing for elderly people who are being abused by their own families. B's good hand squeezed mine. She couldn't say the words, but her eyes, her smile, said everything. I leaned down and kissed her on the forehead, on the same spot I had kissed her in that 5-star medical suite, on the same spot I had kissed her goodnight for 45 years. We had lost a son. A lifetime of memories had been tainted by the truth, but we were alive. We were safe. We were together. And we had found a new kind of peace, a peace built not on the naive hope of a simple life, but on the hard-won dignity of having survived. We had found our purpose. This story is a brutal reminder that kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. Zay spent his life acting humble, trying to teach his son the value of character over cash. But his son and daughter-in-law only saw a pathetic, sick, old folk to be exploited. They forgot that the quietest person in the room is often the one holding all the cards. They valued his perceived weakness more than his actual love. They learned too late that you must never ever underestimate the person who has been quietly paying the bills. Do you think Zay's lesson was too harsh, or was it the only language his son and daughter-in-law would understand?